We begin with Janeway making friends.
When diplomacy fails, there's only one alternative. Violence. Force must be applied without apology. It's the Starfleet way.
In Starfleet we say, a naked man has few secrets, a flayed man none. Janeway's talking to a Vascan ambassador about using Voyager to try to intimidate the Kyrians.
Your reputation in this quadrant precedes you.
I didn't do it. Except the stuff that sounds good. That I did the hell out of. The Vascans are annexing Kyrian lands, and in return for Voyager's help, the Vascans offer the location of a wormhole and the means to stabilize it. So Janeway agrees. Now you might be saying, Chuck, something's odd here. Janeway is so vicious and heartless and ready to resort to violence on a whim. Can you explain what's wrong with all of this? Of course I can. Janeway has a black undershirt instead of a gray one. That's what's bothering you.
This is Captain Janeway of the warship Voyager. Break off your attack or I'll destroy you.
And nobody wants that. Vaporizing you is a waste of perfectly good bleached skulls. The aliens insist on attacking anyway, but Janeway's more concerned about their leader, Tedran, and finding out a way to flush him out.
What do you suggest?
Biogenic weapons will infect the most populated Kyrian territories.
Oh damn, even I'm kind of horrified. Horrified, yet aroused. The ambassador protests, but Janeway says this will bring this crap to an end faster, to draw out Tedran and get her back to spreading joy throughout the Delta Quadrant. Obviously things are different and somewhat goofy. For instance, a Kazon crewman, Neelix in uniform at a bridge station, the Doctor is an android, and he's somehow capable of transmitting bioweapons through a phaser beam. We discover why, because this is all a simulation put on by this guy.
This ship of destruction could wipe out an entire civilization within hours.
Sometimes even on purpose.
As you'll see, her actions would have a lasting effect on our world. Even today, 700 years later, we are still feeling the impact of the Voyager encounter.
I have a feeling that that's a phrase uttered across half the galaxy on a fairly regular basis. This is a museum, and these are Kyrians, thinking about the day that Voyager arrived and everything went to hell. Sorry to be redundant. As you heard, this was 7 centuries ago, so they've had to try to piece together what exactly happened.
Voyager had many weapons at their disposal, including species they'd assimilated along the way.
The means is called a comm badge. He returns to the simulation.
Now, what you are about to see is graphic and unsettling.
Ah, this must be Neelix's cooking show. This episode was directed by Tim Russ. It was his first and only Star Trek directing assignment, besides the fan work of Gods and Men and something called Star Trek Renegades that they're still working on. I don't know. I've still got 3,000 Stargate episodes to get through. It's an interesting challenge to give someone for their first directing assignment ever to handle a show where part of the time the crew has to act completely differently than normal, or at least a mild exaggeration.
I want them defeated, but this is genocide.
Defeat, genocide. Why quibble with semantics?
You say potato, I say weaponized potato bombs. Down in sickbay, Harry and Chakotay are beating information out of a prisoner, or trying to anyway. Harry's little clarinet-playing hands aren't quite up to the job, so they get nasty and have Chakotay talk about his people at him. Yeah, somehow the man is able to withstand even that torture. So the doctor steps in and employs a painful neural degenerator to finally make the guy squeal. With the location of Tedran revealed, Tuvok and Chakotay will lead an assault team to claim him. But first, the noble Kyrian boarding action. Unfortunately, 7 of 9 is in full Borg mode and leading a Borg fighting force, no less, so they're deployed to take out the invaders. So 6 seconds later, that problem is now sorted, and Janeway even lets 7 keep the survivors to add to her mini-collective. See, she is a caring leader. They soon come back with Tedran.
The great Tedran, a man of wisdom and peace, a servant of his people.
We're very much alike, you and I, except you don't have any balls. Tedran doesn't understand her involvement.
He's offered my crew a way home.
To reach your home, you would destroy ours.
That's right.
Finally, someone who understands. I like you, Tedran. I'll kill you second. After his chance for a brief, quiet chastisement of the ambassador, Tedran refuses surrender, and Janeway executes the 2 of them herself, and thus ends our simulation. Soon after, the Kyrians were so devastated that the Vaskins were able to move in and subjugate them.
It took centuries for us to undo the damage that Captain Janeway had done.
A phrase said even more often than the other one, especially in the offices of Starfleet Command, I'm sure. Jesus Christ. Throw this pad on the pile with the other ones, they royally cocked up. Just be careful not to let the pile fall on you like poor Ensign Baker. He still's got a concussion. Probably still would make better decisions than these boobs. Alright, hand me Aardvark to Abacus. But the episode is about more than just showing our crew wearing black undershirts. It's about a question of history. The pitch was always about the Doctor awakening in a museum in the future, but the original concept didn't work because to do that would give away that Voyager would make it home someday. Their concern, I should specify. They wanted to make it an open question as to whether or not they would get back, something I'm sure was often on the audience's mind. Are they going to get themselves killed or stranded due to exasperating incompetence this week, or will they manage to limp to the end credits and escape? Let's find out. So if it had to be in the Delta Quadrant, what were they going to do with this? So Brennan Braga came up with the idea of exploring historical revision, re-examining the past to possibly change the traditional view of it. For instance, when I was a kid, my elementary history book talked about the conquistadors basically in how they led to the creation of the Spanish Empire in the Americas, and that was that. By the time I was actually teaching elementary history, this had been expanded to include a great deal of the negative things that happened while they were building said empire. A more complete picture was being provided. In many ways, it's what many fans, myself included, have done with fiction, questioning assumptions and exploring other meanings in a work. My criticism of Basics was that it was an opportunity spoiled. They took this one chance that they had with the situation created, and then they just made it into another Planet of the Week. Part of what makes Living Witness so effective is that they have fun with the idea, and they also use the opportunity presented to explore the implications of their situation, and not just in a simple way. Despite the fact that Janeway is comically walking around in an SS-inspired version of their uniform and gunning down prisoners with mustache-twirling remarks, the episode is far more sophisticated than Voyager usually was. What we're learning is that centuries later there is still tension between the Kyrians and the Vaskins, the former with a sense of victimization for being marginalized, and the latter unhappy with being constantly portrayed as villains. But Quarren, the guy who's handling this Voyager exhibit, is convinced that they're about to get the best addition ever, a new component that was unearthed that still has data in it. To his surprise, he finds the Doctor inside, who is naturally confused to find himself in engineering with no one but this guy for company. Seems that the EMH backup device was what was found. Tim Russ expressed confusion that some fans had a problem with that, stating that backing up important data is obvious, which is true, and that's why so many of us wondered for so long why Voyager hadn't done that. For instance, it would have come in handy in next month's Message in a Bottle. Basically, just accept that at some point Voyager decided we should build one, and then promptly lost that. Certainly not terribly surprising, if you ask me. The Doctor doesn't take the news that he was left behind very well. Might be concerned he'll be stuck with Kirk Cameron. And obviously he's concerned that everybody he ever knew is dead and gone and nobody knows what happened to them. Still, better news is in store. There's a good chance to be put on trial for war crimes, that whole biogenic weapons thing. Hey, thanks for waking me up so you can kill me. He shows Doc part of the simulation, with the crew at each other's throats and Janeway shooting panels when annoyed, which is obviously not the way things were. Mostly. So he says what he saw. They were only engaging in a trade agreement, and it was the Kyrians who started the war, attacking Voyager.
Heroes, saviors. Obviously, events have been reinterpreted to make your people feel better about themselves. Revisionist history. It's such a comfort.
We were not the aggressors in the Great War. We were the victims.
This hints at one of the dangers of revisionist history, something that some critics have pointed out. Interpreting events in a new way to support one's own agenda. Not even necessarily deliberate misrepresentation, but simply because we see what we want to see oftentimes. Quarren is so upset at the suggestion that he switches off the Doctor in mid-sentence. It is a perfectly understandable response, I'm sorry to say. Outrage at the challenge to one's worldview. We see that all the time, unfortunately. One of the consequences, I think, of intellectual inbreeding, if you will. Something that you can see in any topic-centric community eventually. Constant exposure to the same opinions leads to continual reinforcement of ideas until eventually any challenge, no matter what form it takes, is going to be met with a disproportionate sense of outrage. Room for reasoned discussion can no longer take place anymore. This is not about anything in particular, by the way, if you're trying to read into it. Who was he pissed off at this time? No. This is just an observation I've had after 16 years of looking at a variety of communities and sadly seeing the same patterns repeating over and over again. My own little contribution to history, if you will. A community becomes blind to the world outside of itself and unwilling to deal with it in a reasoned manner, because it cannot be perceived in any terms except as an attack on the foundation of oneself. Intellectual inbreeding is where truthiness is born, really. It takes Quarren a lot of reflecting and soul-searching to even consider the possibility that everything he was ever taught about the war and Voyager could possibly be wrong. Now, he had said he was reasonable and willing to change his views to one of the patrons earlier, yet when he was actually confronted with that challenge, all he could do was lash out. But he allows the Doctor the chance to tell his side, which is that this was nothing more than Voyager trading medical supplies for dilithium.
I wish I could make you one of our diplomats. You might have better luck resolving this situation.
Sure, have you considered biogenic weapons? But the meeting was interpreted as an act of aggression by the Curians and led to the attack. Tedrin leads the assault, killing 3 people in engineering and taking 7 hostage. The Doctor offers to lead the way into the mess hall to take any fire. Wonder if that's his own little historical revisionism, with the ambassador praising his bravery before they go in there. We know the Doctor's got kind of a big ego. The foundation of the historical view of Voyager is heard.
What you're doing. An alliance with these aliens.
We were trading with them, nothing more.
You expect me to believe that? You plan to use this ship to destroy us.
Which no doubt was repeated and expanded upon over and over again until it became what we see in this museum. Yet it's the ambassador who shoots Tedrin, and not while the guy's unarmed and helpless either. But it doesn't end there, which it easily could have, just Quarren seeing and accepting the truth, roll credits. No, because all this is taking place in a larger story, one of global racial tension. And if a historian is uncomfortable with the challenge to his worldview, imagine how the hardliners are going to react to that.
If I can access the bioreadings inside, I can prove that he was killed by a Vascan weapon, not by Captain Janeway.
I fail to see what this would prove. Tedrin died on Voyager, a victim of a conspiracy to oppress my people. The weapon used, who fired it, this is all beside the point.
It is true that the entirety of the topic is not like the Death Star, with one vulnerable point to bring the whole thing down. But it also shows that what really matters isn't what happened. It's about how it plays into one's worldview.
Please, this isn't about race.
It's always about race.
I give the Voyager staff a lot of crap, but I will give them this. They were ballsy enough here to not only throw the hot-button issue of racism into this, but to make the suppressed race no better than their oppressors. Some Vaskins later burst into the museum and smash everything up, outraged that it perpetuates a lie about them, despite the real facts of subjugation in that present day. A race riot breaks out and 2 people are dead. It's a sad repetition of history. Voyager's arrival was what caused the growing hostilities to erupt into full-scale war, and now the Doctor's arrival has caused a similar undercurrent to erupt into a planet-wide upheaval. The Doctor is horrified at this and wants to be deleted, raising another interesting point.
Doctor, you were there. You can't deny what happened.
I can, and I will. Tedrin was a martyr for your people, a hero, a symbol of your struggle for freedom. Who am I to wander in 700 years later and take that away from you?
It's actually an interesting issue to raise. Is an ultimately inconsequential lie worth more than the lives lost over trying to correct it? I guess it depends on how one wants to view the entire topic of history. Some people erroneously believe that the word history is a combination of the words his and story. That's why you never go to ask.com for answers. It's derived from the ancient Greek word historia, meaning learning through research, narration of what is learned, which is itself believed to be derived from the Proto-Indo-European word to know. History will likely never have all the truth, but to not try to find it is against its very purpose. Now, I'm not a historian. I'm sure one could probably explain this better than me, but to me, more so than the idea about the whole being doomed to repeat it thing, is to understand how we got to where we are now, to see the things we as a species did right and the mistakes we made along the way, to learn from the hard lessons and maybe in a sense to provide what little justice there might be by remembering those who did the right thing and to forever remember the crimes of those who thought they could get away with it. To corrupt that with deliberate falsehoods to serve problems of the here and now undermines its entire purpose. It takes history and turns it into nothing more than a tool of propaganda. Maybe a lie could save us. But if that's only because we can't stand the truth, how worthy are we of being saved? And the final reveal, as Quarren has convinced the Doctor that they should use the truth and not perpetuate the lie, is that all of this is itself a recreation by later generations to remember when that decision started the transformation of their societies, to eventually lead to unity between the two people and the Doctor's eventual decision to head home himself. Hopefully with a lot fewer incidents than Voyager itself had. Post-episode follow-up? I'm not sure what to do since technically Neelix only appears as a simulation, but he is still present, so we'll just call this a wipe this week. However, I will give Hollow Janeway the $20 bill award for attempted genocide with her biogenic weapons. Call it inconsistent. I call it doing whatever the hell I like. All scores are relative to the series, so final score for Living Witness is 10 out of 10. It works as a dark comedy in some areas, a mature look at a serious topic in others, without in any way being jarring as it shifts between those. And the little character moments throughout, like the Doctor revealing his true thoughts about Taurus, keeps things from getting dark. Despite the fact that this has no living humans in it, and the only main cast member is actually just a copy of the original, and a simulation of the copy to be exact, the story is one of this series that probably is most tied into the things that Star Trek likes to represent itself as. Challenging contemporary issues and showing optimism about the future, without dumbing itself down with heavy-handedness or black and white, this is the only possible right answer situations. A really excellent achievement all around.
I'm afraid.